Welcome into Sports Memo's Betting Podcast for July 16th. It's CFL, Canadian Football League, every game on the board podcast with Andrew McGinnis, 13-4 on the year, 5-0 on his 5% top-rated plays. He is absolutely killing it north of the border. Hats off to you, Andrew, and welcome into the podcast, bud.
Hey, thanks a lot, Drew. I appreciate that. And it's a week-by-week battle. It's going pretty good so far. Enjoying the league so far. A lot of competitive games. And, we saw a team like Toronto finally get a cover in. I mean, this is the team that's struggling with from a betting perspective, we're definitely learning a lot about each team. And, each week things change. So we see a team like Montreal getting an outright win as 9-point underdogs. I mean, it's a 9-man league, but it's a very crazy league, an entertaining league. So I've been loving it so far. Drew, how are things with you?
Things are good, man. I'm down here in Florida. You're up there in Nova Scotia. So we're pretty far away from each other on the East Coast, but nonetheless, there is Canadian football watchable in the United States. So if you are south of the border, there's still money to be made, and you can watch it. It's entertaining. I like the product, CFL overall, and at 13-4, 5-0 with your top-rated plays, man, the clients are happy with what you're doing, McGinnis. So hats off to you guys. Check out sportsmemo.com for his full season CFL using the coupon code CFLPOD. That's CFLPOD at checkout. It'll be a huge discount there. Rest of the CFL season for just $199. That's a huge discount using the coupon code CFLPOD at checkout. McGinnis, you bring up the Argonauts, Toronto Argonauts, that is, against the Calgary Stampeders. That's at the top of the card here on Thursday, July 18th. The lines actually just came out. You texted me right before we started this podcast. Really no way to go into it as far as having the lines, both sides and totals for the podcast. I'm sure you had your own numbers there. And looks like BetOnline came out with Calgary Stampeders -10 with the total 53.5. What are you thinking here with the Argos and Stampeders leading us off on Thursday night?
The first thing that I think when I look at this line here, the second that I saw it, Drew, was that loss they took yesterday or last week to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, talking about the Calgary Stampeders, definitely changed the way this line would be. I don't think this should be where it is. I think this should be a little bit bigger. I think Calgary should be far more favorites, but we saw a performance out of Toronto last week that still wasn't great by any means. I mean, they had a horrific start. Winnipeg had the best start they could have possibly asked for. Opening kickoff return for, I believe, 117 yards. They took care of business in the first half, but slowly but surely, this Toronto Argonauts team ended up making their way back into the game and, getting things going. This is one of those things for me where I look at the Argonauts and I just don't think that they have what it takes to, put up 21 points in back-to-back games. And, not that they covered last week, I meant to say, but just really actually ended up putting up some points for the first time. I was actually on the under 17.5 points team total for Toronto. And the only reason why I feel like they actually surpassed that number, Drew, is strictly based off those garbage time points. I mean, when you allow a team like Winnipeg to have 48 points, I could just tell that Winnipeg slacked off and didn't take things too seriously. But if there's a team in the entire Canadian Football League that doesn't take losses, lightly, it's going to be the Calgary Stampeders, the team that's really been at the top of this league for so many years, past several years, losing 30-23 just on a couple costly plays. I think that Nick Arbuckle had probably his weakest game so far that I've seen him play. Based off the media reports and based off interviews that I've seen him in, he seems fully prepared, fully ready to bounce back and have a good week for his team. The thing for me when I look at player interviews is seeing the ability for players to recognize what they did wrong and be able to talk about what they want to do better and improve, and realize that it's not one of those things where you want to come out and just throw that 80-yard toss right away, but it's just a play-by-play, quarter-by-quarter type of thing. And that's really what I felt when I listened to Arbuckle's interview. And a couple sacks that he took really did push them back and, forced their kicker to take a tough one. And also, it ended up actually being a field goal missed return for Brandon Banks. And, that's one thing you love about the CFL, being able to do that. And when a field goal goes wide, you can have a guy back there getting ready to return that. And, that can be costly. And that's what really helped Hamilton come out strong there. And, Hamilton, I believe, closed at -4 favorites. They end up covering that number. And I look at this matchup here, and I think that it's complete mismatch. I think that Calgary, from the start of the game till the very end, will not take this team lightly. Calgary 7-1 against the spread in their last 8 meetings against the Argonauts. Notable to mention as well, the under is 9-3 in the last 12 meetings in Calgary. I just think when you look at the offense overall, Calgary has far more weapons than this Toronto team does, and I think that they're going to realize that, hey, look, we allowed a horrible 30 points against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and we don't want to let that happen again. And now they're playing a much weaker team, so they have to really put on defensively and show us what they can do. So I'll be honest, Drew, I'm super shocked with this -10 spread here. I think that it's not where it should be whatsoever, and I like the Stampeders in this one. I do also have a slight lean to the under. I think it's far too high, and I think that Toronto will not be able to put up too many points against, for lack of better terms, pissed off Calgary Stampeders team. So we're looking at the Calgary Stampeders on the points, -10 or 11, wherever you're shopping, and also under 53.5.
And McGinnis, you bring up Arbuckle and Calgary here. That was a game I actually watched. And in Arbuckle, I kind of have, I've watched him in college football for a long time there at Georgia State. He's the Sun Belt Conference leading passer all time there. And he can throw the deep ball, but there was some wide receiver drops there. Do you think that they'll be able to overcome that, or are they really lacking talent at the wide receiver position?
I actually love that you mentioned that, Drew, because there was a whole article written about Eric Rogers, receiver for the Calgary Stampeders, and the amount of drops that he had, and certain guys that weren't able to get things together. And I feel like they will be able to respond. This is an all-star team. This is a team that's been there before. Like I said, if there's a team in the league that I can really rely on to bounce back, they don't need to have Bo Levi Mitchell out there to feel comfortable, to feel confident. That was obviously a huge game for the Ticats to come in there and make a difference and get pretty much a huge win against a team that they can barely ever beat. So this is really a good bounce back spot here for the Calgary Stampeders. And like I said, Drew, I'm very curious why we're getting this -10 number. Toronto only showed skill really in the garbage time of that game last week. So I'm not really buying anything Toronto is selling still, except for I got to give credit to Darrell Walker. He finally got involved. For some reason, the Toronto Argonauts were not going to him really throughout the first several weeks of the season, and he's pretty much going to be their bread and butter. Reminder to everybody that he actually left Edmonton to go there, get paid, get some more money, and kind of be the star of the show for the Argonauts. But they haven't really been throwing him the ball. They haven't really been throwing it his way, and then they finally started finding him. So a lot of respect to that. But I'll tell you, Drew, this Toronto Argonauts defense still looks very exposable, looks very weak, and they can't get some key stops when they need to. And I really do expect to see a very angry Calgary team this week.
And just handicapping 101 here, what about spot-wise for the Argos and Stampeders? Travel from Toronto to Calgary, for us not exactly 100% familiar with where everything is in Canada. Is this a tough travel spot? And what about bye weeks in this matchup?
No, it's certainly a tough travel spot. And, for Toronto, a team that, coming off a grueling game like that, you got to wonder really what they can do. But the thing is, they're coming from Winnipeg, so they were there. Then I assume they went back to Toronto, practiced there, then head out to Calgary. That's a far travel. I mean, I think people underestimate sometimes that the travel path that some of these Canadian teams have to take in all sports really to get certain places. Talk about the Toronto Raptors or certain teams in the NHL, but certainly here in the CFL from east to west, it certainly makes a difference. And I always talk about it with you on a week-to-week basis, Drew, on which teams that I feel have that home field advantage. Stampeders are definitely up there. I mean, they've been a top team, but when they're at home, they certainly look a lot better and make a huge difference. And this one will not be a pretty game. I'd get on this number fast for all you listeners out there because this one will move for sure.
And I do want to correct myself when I was saying the numbers. I said Bet Online came out with -10. I want to give credit where credit's due. Actually, Pinnacle led the market at least this week with Calgary coming out at -10, as of Winnipeg, the Blue Bombers coming out -9.5 at home. This is the Friday night game. McGinnis, we got Ottawa Red Blacks at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Looks like Blue Bombers -9.5 across the board. 55 the total on Friday night.
Yeah, Drew, like you mentioned before, I mean, these lines kind of just popped up before our podcast started, but by no means does that really impact, for this game anyway, the way I feel about this spread and, the way my thoughts were coming into this one. This is a bet on spot for Ottawa in my eyes. This is kind of one of those really, team defining games. And I hate to use those generic words and stuff like that, Drew, but I really do think it is in this spot here, because you look at Montreal last week, they had a cakewalk against Ottawa. I mean, they looked like a much more dominant, a much more confident, stronger team pretty much all over the entire football field. And, this isn't the Red Blacks team that we expected to see. Montreal is a team that's growing week by week. And I think as Ottawa comes into this one here and they're playing such a strong team in Winnipeg, pretty much, in my opinion, the best team in the league right now, they're going to have to bring everything that they have. And it starts at the quarterback position. We did not see enough from Davis last week. We actually had Coach Campbell saying that, this guy is going to be our number one guy. He will be our number one guy throughout the year. We're relying on him heavily. Well, we're going into week 6 right now, Drew, and we already have some quarterback changes, quarterback controversy, as Jonathan Jennings is now taking the first string snaps. So we're seeing him now kind of hanging out with the first string and getting those reps. So you got to wonder if maybe Campbell's taking a little bit of time away from Davis and seeing what Jennings has to offer. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that story unfolds as the week progresses. But I just don't think anyone showed up. They looked sleepy. They looked like they were not ready for the game, and they got walked all over by a very, very hungry Montreal team. And you look at a team like Winnipeg coming off a game last week where they completely dominated. This is a game, like I mentioned, from the start to finish, they were piling points. I mean, even the third, fourth quarter, they kept on padding the stats and going, no matter who was in there. Chris Streveler got in the game. He started taking care of business, but Matt Nichols had an outstanding game. I just think that this is one of those spots here where Ottawa comes in just a little bit more motivated, a little bit more upset, and Winnipeg is just being very satisfied with themselves. And we're getting a pretty decent number here. And I always talk about on this podcast, East versus West. We know the East is much, much less skilled so far, and the West has been so strong. But this is a spot here where I think the Eastern Conference team that I still see being at the top of that conference near the end of the season, up there with Hamilton, is being very, very undervalued. And, we're getting 9.5 points, and I think that's just far too many. This one will be a lot closer than people may think. I would definitely take the points with the Red Blacks, expect a much better offensive performance, and their defense will come along. I will stand by this. That will be their bread and butter come the end of this season. The Red Blacks is great. That's what Coach Campbell is really his bread and butter, just getting those key stops. And, come playoff time, that's what they're known for, is keeping the score low and getting the job done defensively. So I'm going to look at the Red Blacks, Drew, on the dog spot here, plus 9.5. That's too many points for me.
We're talking with Andrew McGinnis at McGinnis Picks on Twitter. He's 13-4 this year in the CFL, 5-0 in his 5% top-rated plays at sportsmemo.com. Check out the rest of his CFL season. Huge discount right now on Sports Memo using the coupon code CFLPOD. That's CFLPOD at checkout. It brings the price of the rest of his CFL season to just $199. 13-4 on the season. We got 2 games on Saturday. McGinnis, we'll hit them real quick here. Edmonton Eskimos versus the Montreal Alouettes. -4. Edmonton on the road. 54 being the total.
Now, this one sticks out to me big time, Drew. This is one of those ones here where people ask me really what I've been doing so far in this season and how I've been trying to pick my spots. And I really try and have a game plan going into each week, but I also try and learn from each week what I'm seeing from each team, each player, each coach. And what I saw last week was a great performance out of the Montreal Alouettes, but was it good enough for them to be just laying +4 against this strong Edmonton team? The answer is no. Simply no. I saw a great performance out of Montreal, but for them to be, just +4 underdogs, I don't like that whatsoever. I mean, Edmonton has been an explosive, dominant team, and it's all led by Trevor Harris. He once again had an outstanding performance, 79% passing completion, 276 yards, 2 touchdowns. Once again, we just saw so much spread out offense. He's finding so many people. We saw Tavares Daniels back in action. He had 4 receptions for 53 yards. Greg Ellingson, as we know, one of the favorite targets for Harris, 6 receptions, 66 yards. We're just seeing it all around. Ricky Collins getting involved, CJ Gable, Kenny Stafford, so many people, making a name for themselves. And that's the best part about this Eskimos team is it seems to me it's taken almost no time for Trevor Harris to establish a connection, establish chemistry with each of his receivers. And for a team that was really weak on defense for many, many years, Drew, I got to take my hat off to them and give credit when credit is due. This team is stepping up big time on defense. We've seen it for a few weeks now, and part of me, Drew, was thinking, you know what, maybe this is just, a few games. Maybe they're just having a good couple games defensively, but definitely not, man. They're coming out here strong defensively, and when you've got a quarterback like Harris, powering your offense, then you can go out there and rely on your defense to get the job done. You got to feel confident back in a team like that. And, this is a team that I rely on right now. And, coming into this spot here, I like a lot. I mean, they just allowed 6 points only against the BC Lions team led by Mike Riley. And I know the Lions aren't having their best season. I know Mike Riley isn't having their best season. But that's still a very talented roster with guys like Deron Carter, Brian Burnham, John White, Shaquille Johnson, Lamar Durant. And they couldn't get anything established. I mean, this was all Eskimos, Drew, from the first play, and that was pretty much one of those games that proved to me that hey, this Eskimos team really does mean business. And, now looking at this Montreal team coming off 2 outright wins and really stepping things up. Vernon Adams Jr., a guy that we didn't expect to really be talking about too much. We thought we'd be talking about Antonio Pipkin a lot, but Vernon Adams Jr. nonetheless coming in and putting up 36 points for this Montreal team. He actually ran one in for, I believe, 12 yards. He's looked good, and he spread things out. He looked confident, but I don't think he's looked good enough to be just +4 dog here in this spot. And, for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and take Edmonton right now. I'm not going to wait. I think that one will go up as well. And this is kind of a good spot here for Edmonton. I just think that Montreal kind of overachieved last week. They got a few bounces to go their way. It was a terrible game for Ottawa, really, which made Montreal look a lot better. But credit to them. Montreal also been all over the media this week as they finally fired their GM, Kavis Reed. He's been a distraction. He's been horrible in the front office. He's been someone you don't want to have around. And the league's wanted him gone for a while now. I mean, this Montreal team is pretty much run by the league until they can find new owners. And, Kavis Reed, there's just so many things. I don't really want to talk too much about it because I know there's some rumors that I don't know how much were true, but Drew, I actually did hear that he was literally handing out envelopes with checks or cash to players so that way his team stays under the salary cap. Just different sneaky things like that to try and avoid, different problems with the league. And, the commissioner did not like that, obviously, and different things that he was doing, so they finally got rid of him and canned him. And it's just hilarious to kind of think about that after 2 straight wins outright, this team fires their GM. So, nonetheless, I do like Edmonton here, but I would lean to the over because we're seeing a lot of points coming from both teams.
Good stuff, McGinnis there, and the doubleheader on Saturday, the night slate here. BC Lions, Saskatchewan Rough Riders. We got 51.5 being the total. Looks like the Rough Riders laying 2 at home.
This is just one of those ones for me where it's got to be just to keep fading the cold. This is a British Columbia team that's 1-4 straight up and 1-4 against the spread. They're putting up, an average 20 points per game, average of 31 points against. And that tells you all you really need to know. We've got the Saskatchewan team, coming off some rest right now. I think they're going to come off prepared, ready to go. I think the more time you give the Saskatchewan team, the better for them and the more prepared they're going to be with the offense that they have, with the weapons that they have. And I really feel like they're going to come into this one and dominate. It's one of those ones for me where I have to sit back and realize that this BC Lions team is not the team that I really thought they were. And if you look at right before their bye, Saskatchewan in week 4 lost 37-10 against the Calgary Stampeders. So, I think if you have a loss like that, then you go into the bye and then you come right back and you're playing one of the worst teams in the league. it's got to be a good spot for you. You got to come out and put on and put your best foot forward and put out a great performance. And Saskatchewan's playing at home. And for any of the Canadian listeners out there or American, you definitely know that in Saskatchewan, they love their football. I mean, they live and breathe Canadian football. And those fans definitely missed it last week. So I assume they're going to come out and make a lot of noise and be behind their guys. I don't really know what the problem is right now, Drew, with this BC team. It just seems like there's no chemistry. There's no consistency. They make one good play here, and the next four, there's a lot of confusion. It's really troubling for them. And I do kind of feel for them, but I also think there's a lot of new coaching staff for them. There's new players at different spots they're not used to being in. And I just feel this is an outstanding spot for Saskatchewan to come out here. And we're getting a fantastic number. I mean, just the -2. I mean, I would just go ahead and take that right now, like I said about the other ones, because that one will move. So this is either a BC spot where they can either show up and prove themselves that they mean business, or Saskatchewan come out here and say, hey, look, we're fresh off a bye, we're angry off that week 4 loss to Calgary, and we're going to show you who's boss here in this Western Division. I mean, this West is so competitive that, I'm looking forward to it, Drew. Seriously, you and I talking each week on this podcast and seeing the standings go up and down and seeing how it moves, because it can be so competitive, and really every team has a shot to be that number one team. So I look at Saskatchewan taking this one very seriously, and this is more of a, fading the cold team kind of spot here. So we'll go with the Saskatchewan Roughriders -2.
All right, looking towards Saskatchewan in that one. And guys, thanks for tuning in. Please comment on YouTube, like, share on your social medias. It does help us out. And feel free to hit us up on Twitter. At Drew Martin Betts is my Twitter handle. At McGinnis Picks is Andrew McGinnis's Twitter handle. Feel free to ask any questions, anything you want answered on the podcast, CFL. And it can be like overall questions on how we look to bet it. Just questions in general is fine. Life advice, whatever you want to throw at us. And first question, Alouettes. I am pronouncing that wrong, right, McGinnis? And how do you pronounce it correctly? And what exactly is an Alouette?
I'm honestly just going to tell you, I don't know the answer to that one. I'm not really that French educated. Okay. But Alouettes is the answer. I wish I knew French better. I'm going to spend more time in Quebec, hopefully in the future. We can probably get that a quick Google search and maybe post a video or a tweet about it and try and educate the listeners. So I'm sorry I can't answer that for you, Drew. I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
No, nothing to be sorry about. That works. We'll have to figure that out at some other time. What about, is Montreal the best party place in Canada?
Yes.
For real? Why?
Montreal is the spot to be, man. That's the place to go. I think a lot of people would probably tell you Toronto or other spots, but Montreal it's the Vegas of Canada, man. It's the place where you want to go and just have a weekend. Just the clubs, the nightlife, the city, the whole downtown area. You can go down on Sheridan Street or St. Catherine Street and just walk and see so many sights and so many nice shops, hotels, different areas, attractions, entertainment. If you go there in, let's say, October, November, you go there to see a Montreal game. You could also see an Alouettes game. Just the nightlife there is unbelievable. I've been there a few times, and I hope to get there more. I have some friends actually that are, in master's programs up at McGill University, the English school in Montreal, and they absolutely love it. I mean, whenever they get the chance, they're heading right into the city and having the blast and time of their lives. So short answer would definitely be yes. I think I would definitely regret it, Drew, if I did not give a little shout out to where I'm from, because even though we're not the biggest city, we have here in Nova Scotia and also Newfoundland the most bars per capita in North America. So we certainly know how to party here in the very East Coast in Nova Scotia. And even though we're a smaller place, we know how to get things going and fired up on a Friday night. So Montreal for sure, but definitely have to give a shout out to the more East Coast here in Halifax.
All right, good stuff, McGinnis.
I'm going to get you here one of these days too, Drew.
Yeah, no, I'd like to. I've never actually been to Canada, so good neighbors. But either way, fun sport to watch there in the CFL, and you can get the rest of Andrew McGinnis's CFL season for just $199 using the coupon code CFL Pod at checkout. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets. We'll be back tomorrow talking with Nick Borman, talking some soccer and some golf betting as well, and then Vino later in the week talking MLB and college football previews. So, thanks for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets. We'll talk tomorrow.